This is my 6th gathering for Gardner. I'm very pleased to be here. Theodore DeLand was a inventor of magic tricks. He lived from 1873 to 1931, and he was active for about 20 years in the very first part of the century. His father was a prominent civil servant in D.C., and he got a job at the Mint in Philadelphia, probably through patronage, because there's no evidence he was a particularly good worker. He got fired in 1917 because of some problems he had with management, and he ended up being institutionalized a few years later, and he died in an insane asylum. How many of you have ever heard of DeLand? Is there anyone in here who's actually, okay. Remember your answer to the question. He's famous, if you know him at all, for having developed a number of ways to do what would have been very complicated sleight of hand tricks with specially printed and mechanically gaffed playing cards. You see the double-ended cards that he did, the row of cards that would look like he had a stack of cards behind another one. And some of these tricks are still in use today at a professional level by prominent magicians. Look at the top right one. When you answered the question before, how many of you were holding a playing card in your hand at the time? He also invented a number of magic decks, which were decks which had markings on the back. If you cut the deck, you could look at the back of the card and you know the card you cut to, you know the card that was on the face of the other half, the card on the top of the deck, the card at the bottom of the deck. Some of them were pretty complicated systems. In the 1920s, in an interview, he said he had to discontinue some of these because the mob was using the marked decks to cheat people at casinos and such. And I don't know if that's true or not. It's probably some of his marketing hype. But the reason I'm talking about him today is because he was also active using optical illusions in the way he marketed and sold his tricks. One of them he called devil dice, or the 6 or 7 dice. You can see it's the inside-out corner illusion. He's modified it by putting faces of dice on it. And he would sell these, he would put them in his ads. He would sell you blank playing cards with this on the back, and you could take them to your local printer and have your own contact information put on it. He would sell you a copper engraving plate where you could print your own. He would make decks of cards where he would put that illustration on the back of the card, and that would just be the back card illustration. And you can see in one of his catalogs, without the spots on the die, he used that illusion as just an interesting visual aspect to the catalog. He wasn't the only person to ever use something like that, of course. This is a catalog for Quaker Oats from 1896. This is a Vanishing Area Pot. Well, Gardner called it the principle of concealed distribution. If you count the number of playing cards on the top one, it's 16. If you cut the bottom there at the score line and swap the pieces right and left, you get 15 cards. And this is a fairly common illusion. He's the first magician I know of to have ever used it. This was from Theo Bamberg, who was a Dutch magician, and so he would have bought some of DeLand's cards and, like I say, put his own information on it. And again, he would sell these cards blank with a spot for you to put your own work, or he would print them for you or sell you the printing plate and you could get it done. So other magicians have used them. The one on the left is from M. Lewis Company. M. Lewis was a pseudonym that DeLand used. He sold to magicians at a wholesale level on his own name, but he also wanted to sell at retail, and so to avoid looking like he was in competition with his customers, he sold it under the name M. Lewis. You can see where another magician has printed his name. There's an Italian one, and then down here in the bottom right is a knockoff that's probably from the 40s or 50s. It's an old illusion. This card here probably goes back to the 1800s. The principle itself goes back to the mid-1500s in a book by an architect. Many other magicians have used this same principle in some of their flyers and advertising. The Rabbets is a piece that Martin Gardner did in Parents Magazine in 1952. He wrote a puzzle column for them. The red and blue one is Mark Settedicotti's work. The top right is Mel Stover, who I believe came to one of the earlier gatherings. He's deceased now. Ali Bongo is a British magician who's used it. Matt King is active out in Las Vegas right now. His cousin Bill King does a cartoon where every Sunday paper they do a magic trick, and this happened to be one of them. This is my favorite one. The British comic strip Modesty Blaze was in the 60s, and she was sort of a sexy female James Bond. A guy in England who owned a magic shop commissioned the artist of Modesty Blaze to do this for him. And it's hard to tell from the small resolution, but it's a really nice piece of artwork in addition to being a nice puzzle. Another one he did is called a Phantom Baseball. You may be familiar with this as an appearing coin trick. If you take that there on a piece of paper about the size of a playing card and you do this with it, normally when you see that you produce a coin from underneath because it makes a little gray circle in the middle of the radial pie piece. But the addition of those two little marks on either side made it look like the seams on a baseball, and I don't know how he figured that out. I've never seen it done as a baseball. It's always a coin. Again, this is M. Lewis, which was DeLand's front company, and he would sell these as cards or as advertising. Any way you wanted to get it, he would do it. You remember Kerry Lauder, who's been here many times. He would leave these business cards around. He's a magician and photographer. The one on the right is a paddle sold by the Japanese magic trick company Tenyo. And you take it and you spin it around, and you pull a quarter out from under it, and it makes it look like you produced a quarter from midair. This is the perspective illusion. This is from 1908, I believe. And again, it's a small illustration. You could put it on your business card. You could put it in your ads. All three figures are the exact same height, but the perspective lines make them look different sizes. Normally, when you see this illusion, it's called the Ponzo illusion, after Mario Ponzo, who, quote, discovered it in 1911, but DeLand was using it in 1908, so I don't think DeLand invented it, but I think the history of it's probably a little bit murky. This is one of my favorite versions of it, Roger Sherford, Terra Sub Terra. Roger is the same guy who invented the tabletop illusion, which Martin wrote about and many of you are familiar with. Grin or Grouch is just one of the flip upside down faces. You've seen, if not this illustration, I'm sure you've seen others of the same kind, and again, he would sell it to whoever wanted to buy it. Rotating vanishing puzzles, the most prominent ones are from Sam Lloyd. This is from 1896. He did several versions of it, Teddy and the Lions, which is kind of un-PC because of the African natives on it, the disappearing bicyclist. The Lost Jap is still in print, but now it's called The Lost Man. The one on the right is a Canadian knockoff that showed up just a couple months after Lloyd's Get Off the Earth puzzle. And DeLand did one of those too. This is called Ghost Girl. It's got women and goats on it, which I don't understand the appeal of vanishing or appearing goats. But the only known example of this is a newsprint advertising circular in a Houdini scrapbook at the Library of Congress. So there's no known examples of the puzzle itself in print. I was able to get this from a friend who's writing a book about Theodore DeLand, a man named Richard Kaufman, who publishes Genie magazine, a magic magazine, and publishes a lot of magic-related books. And he's got a biography and a collection and explanation of just about all of DeLand's tricks coming out sometime. The manuscript is complete. He's still doing layout work and photographs and things like that, but I hope to see that in the next year or two. And he went to the library and took photographs of it, and we're trying to get a nice version that could be put into the book. I said that he worked at the Mint. In about 1918, he started accusing his boss, the superintendent of the Mint, of having been a counterfeiter. And there's no evidence to say that he was a counterfeiter. There's some letters that make it a little bit ambiguous. But his boss got tired of it and said, look, you can't keep doing this. And he kept doing it. Finally, they fired him for insubordination. And as time went on, he started acting more and more irrational. And finally, he went into an insane asylum. But in 1920, after the Mint and before the asylum, he was working just trying to keep ends together as a night watchman at the B&O Railroad. And this is nothing to do with illusions. It's just an interesting little thing I found out about him. He was walking a night watch on the Delaware River, and he looks down in the river, and there's a life preserver from the Lusitania, which had been blown up by the Germans in World War I 5 years earlier. And somehow it floated through the ocean and up the river with the tides and landed there, and he found it. Now this picture here is just a few years after the picture at the front of the chart, and you can see how the years have not been kind to him. I mean, he looks a lot older there. The process that made him, he had a number of health issues, and then going insane was really rough on him. As it would be on any of us, I guess. Like I said, Kaufman's got a book going on this. I ripped a couple of those illustrations out of Jerry Slocum's collection, the online pictures at the Lilly Library, and appreciate that. John Henley was the magician in the UK who gave me the Women one, and Ben Crane is a place that sells cards. And then you can't do any research in magic at all nowadays without accessing the Ask Alexander database that Bill Kalush has put together. So thanks to him for that.